Hello and welcome back to the Android App Training Online course. We're almost done creating our second app called Android Zoo, and in this video we're going to learn how to change the graphic layout of our app so that it looks a little bit nicer. I want you to take a look at this, which is the components viewer, and this, which is the emulator. Now you'll see that the way this looks in the component viewer is not really what it looks like in the emulator. And remember, the emulator is going to show you what it will actually look like on a phone when it's installed. So just be aware that what you see isn't always completely what you get from this components viewer. Now let's drag this emulator out of the way here. And what we're going to do is start adding a couple of spacers in between the kitty and the lion and the tiger so that we don't get this smushed together image right here. We have some spaces in between those. Now, in order to do this, we should start by highlighting our table arrangement here. You can click on the box anywhere, and you can also just really click outside of the image area, and now we see that our table arrangement is highlighted. And what I'd like to do is actually add 3 more columns here. We're going to leave the rows just the same. The reason I'm going to add 3 more columns is because I want to add 1 column here where I can put a spacer, 1 here, and 1 here. And hopefully when we're done, this will look a lot nicer than it did in the first place. So let's go ahead and change our columns to 6. And when I click outside here, you won't see any change here. And what actually happened was the columns were presented out here on the right side. So if I drag the tiger over, you can see now I can clip it into the next column here. But what I'm going to do for starters is just drag some of these out of the way. So I'm going to drag the buttons out of here. And while we're at it, I'm going to drag these labels out as well. And the reason I'm doing this is just to make it a little bit easier for myself when I start adding these spacers. I can add a spacer and then throw an image in there and another spacer and an image, and then I'll put the labels in at the end. And as you start playing around with these types of apps that we're creating in the online course, you'll start to figure out the best method for you to do it. I've found that this is the easiest way for me. Okay, so let's take a look at how we create some spacers. We'll use the screen arrangement drawer here. And I'm going to drag in a horizontal arrangement. And I'll put that in the top left corner. I don't want to put it down here quite yet. And you'll see that it always comes in as a square. And what we need to do is go over here and change the width. And instead of automatic, which comes in as the square here, we don't want to fill the parent because that'll go all the way across the screen. In this case, we want to tell it how many pixels wide we want it to be. So for starters, let's try 10 pixels and just see how that works. Click OK. Now we see that our horizontal arrangement has changed to 10 pixels wide. Now let's drag our kitty button in here, and we'll do the same thing for a spacer in between our next images. So we'll change this to 10 pixels wide, and we'll drag our lion button here, and another horizontal arrangement. We'll make that again 10 pixels wide, and we'll drag our tiger in here. Now let's take a look at our emulator and see what just happened when we did that. So now we see we have some spaces in between these images, and it looks a little bit nicer. And as I look at the right side here, I see that it's a little bit wider than the kitty images on the left side here. So why don't we try changing this spacer on the left side here to 15 pixels and see if that looks a little bit better. We'll pull up our emulator. And actually that looks about right. So now we have our labels down here at the bottom. Let's go ahead and pull those back in. And we want to put the kitty right under the kitty. We don't want to put it in the spacer areas. So we'll put it right under the kitty. Same thing with the tiger and with the lion. And now when we take a look at our emulator, we'll see that our labels are in place. Now the last thing that I'm going to want to do for this is I want to add 1 more spacer so that these images aren't all smushed up to the very top of the app screen. So in order to do that, we'll do another horizontal arrangement, but we'll just drag that up above our table arrangement that we already have in there. Now what we want to do is have this horizontal arrangement go all the way across the screen, but we won't only want it to be so high because again we're using this as a spacer. So we'll make sure it's highlighted, and we'll start by filling the parent with the width. So now we're all the way across the screen. And for our height, why don't we try, let's say 15 pixels. And we'll click OK. Now we see that we have our spacer here, the horizontal arrangement, all the way across the top, and it's 15 pixels high. So notice the tiger image is actually spilling off the right of the screen here, but when we drag in our emulator, we'll see what it actually looks like. And you can see that we have a nice 15 pixel buffer on the left, the top, and then this is about 15 pixels as well, and then we have 10 pixels in between our images. And in my view, that looks like a pretty nicely graphically laid out app. Now, if you wanted to expand your app and have more rows of images and labels and really make this into a fun app for, let's say, your kids, so that they can open up your app and press on any number of animals and get the animal noises. Now, there's two different ways we can expand our app here. We can certainly take another table arrangement, drag it in here, and essentially recreate what we just did right up here. And in this case, that might be the best way to go. You can certainly click on your first table arrangement and expand it by adding rows. Let's say we want to put 4 rows or 6 rows down here. And that may also be a good way to do it because we already have our spacers in here. And as you add some more rows, the spacers will continue to be in their current format. Now, the advantage to actually adding new table arrangements and doing the same thing you did up here with this arrangement is going to be that you can add spacers then very easily in between this table arrangement and this new table arrangement that you create down below. And if you had chosen to add some more rows to the current table arrangement, when you try to add this horizontal spacer, it's going to mess up the rest of your graphic layout here. Because if you try to put a horizontal arrangement in this table all the way across the screen, it's going to start pushing all these things off to the right because we have a table arrangement, remember here. So we have different cells. And so if you're able to just put this horizontal arrangement in between the two table arrangements, then you can change the width and the height, and it won't affect what's happening in this table arrangement. All right, so we've completed our Android Zoo app, and I've shown you how to add extra animals if you so choose. And I wanted to take an opportunity to let you know that in the AndroidAppTraining.com online course, you'll find that you have the ability to create a blog entry in each of the modules where you learn to create a different type of app. And the reason we set this up is to allow you to think about how you can take a relatively simple app like this and essentially repurpose it and make it into different things. So I chose to do an Android Zoo here, but you could do a multitude of different things. So as a student in the course, we encourage you to share your ideas with the rest of the class, because a big part of what we're doing in this course is not only learning how to use App Inventor and create apps, but use your imagination and come up with different ways that you can create apps using the same methods you've already learned.